I never intended to spy on my own son. But isn't that how these things always begin? With the best intentions, leading straight to hell. The security camera was supposed to be simple peace of mind. A blinking red eye watching over my empty house while I visited my sister in Tampa. At 62, living alone in our sprawling Connecticut colonial since Jack's funeral 8 months ago, I'd grown jumpy about every creaking floorboard and rustling branch. The security company promised I could check in anytime from my phone. Set it and forget it, they said. I almost had forgotten it until day 6 of my vacation, when boredom and a nagging worry about whether I'd unplugged the coffee maker had me opening the app. That's when I saw them, David and Lisa, my son and daughter-in-law, using their emergency key to let themselves into my house. Initially, relief washed over me. David had promised to check on things while I was away. It was comforting to see him honoring that commitment. But they didn't head toward the kitchen to water plants or collect mail. Instead, they moved with purpose through my living room, their hushed voices barely audible through the camera's microphone. Already checked upstairs, Lisa was saying, her voice tense. It has to be in his office. Mom never goes in there anymore, David replied. Not since the funeral. They disappeared down the hallway toward Jack's office, the shrine to my late husband that I'd left untouched since his heart attack. I frowned, increasing the volume on my phone. Why would they be interested in Jack's office? When they returned to the camera's view 15 minutes later, their expressions had changed. David looked ashen, his fingers clenched around a leather portfolio I recognized as Jack's. Lisa kept glancing nervously toward the front windows. She can never know about this, David said, his voice clearer now as they paused in the living room. If these accounts are traced back to Mom's name, she'll go to prison. Dad set her up perfectly. How could he do this to her? Lisa whispered. 39 years of marriage and he makes her his fall guy? I froze, the phone trembling in my hand. Fall guy? Prison? What were they talking about? David's gaze suddenly locked onto the camera, his eyes widening. Is that... Shit! The security camera's on! The light is red! Lisa's hand flew to her mouth. I thought you said she wouldn't be monitoring it. She never checks technology unless I set it up for... The feed cut to black. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the blank screen, desperately tapping to reconnect. Nothing happened. Someone, David presumably, had disabled the camera. I sat on my sister's guest bed, mind racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. What accounts was David talking about? How had Jack set me up? My husband had been a respected investment advisor, conservative, cautious, the model of financial propriety. We'd lived comfortably but never extravagantly on his income and my earnings as a high school librarian before retirement. My phone rang, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. Unknown number flashed on the screen. Hello? I answered, expecting David. The voice that responded was deliberately disguised, pitched low through some kind of filter. Stop watching the recordings. For your own safety, forget what you saw. A chill ran down my spine. Who is this? David? Your son can't protect you if you keep looking. Neither of you understands what Jack was involved in. The less you know, the safer you'll be. I don't understand. There are signatures, your signatures, on documents worth millions. Transactions that would put you in federal prison for 20 years. Your husband made sure of that. The call disconnected, leaving me in stunned silence. I immediately tried to call David, but my call went straight to voicemail. Same with Lisa's phone. When I tried the security app again, my password no longer worked. Something was very wrong. The conversation I'd overheard, this threatening call, none of it aligned with the life I thought I'd been living, with the man I'd been married to for nearly 4 decades. I booked the first flight home, ignoring my sister's confused protests. As the plane taxied down the runway, my phone pinged with a text. Unknown. Don't go home. They're watching the house. Jack didn't die of a heart attack, and he made sure you'll take the fall for everything. I stared at the message in disbelief. Jack didn't die of a heart attack? I'd identified his body at the hospital myself, seen his ashen face with my own eyes. Hadn't I? As the plane lifted into the clouds, taking me back toward a home that suddenly felt like foreign territory, a terrible thought bloomed in my mind. After 39 years of marriage, how well had I really known Jack Williams? And more urgently, what exactly had he done that could send me to prison in his place? The taxi from the airport pulled into my driveway at 9:47 p.m., the familiar silhouette of my colonial home stark against the night sky. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Porch light glowing, garden beds neatly mulched, American flag hanging limply in the still June air. Yet nothing felt the same. "You want me to wait while you get inside, ma'am?" the driver asked, eyeing the darkened windows. "Make sure everything's all right?" I nearly said yes. Instead, I handed him cash with a generous tip. "No, thank you. My son is expecting me." A lie, but a necessary one. I needed to face whatever waited inside alone, without witnesses. The front door's lock turned smoothly under my key. Inside, the house smelled different. A faint trace of Lisa's perfume mingled with something else. I stood motionless in the foyer, listening. The house creaked and settled, familiar sounds that had never before seemed menacing. I flicked on lights as I moved through the ground floor. Living room, untouched. Dining room, the same. Kitchen. I froze. A coffee mug sat in the sink, lipstick stain on the rim. Not mine. Not Lisa's preferred shade either. Someone else had been in my house. Jack's office door stood ajar, a thin slice of darkness visible through the gap. I'd kept it closed since his death, preserving it like a museum exhibit of my husband's life. With trembling fingers, I pushed it open and fumbled for the light switch. The destruction was immediate and obvious. File cabinets hung open, their contents strewn across the floor. The painting behind his desk, a mediocre landscape Jack had inexplicably paid a small fortune for, had been removed from the wall, revealing a wall safe I'd never known existed. The safe door hung open, empty. I stepped carefully through the debris, noticing the drawer linings pulled out, the books swept from shelves, the methodical nature of the search. This wasn't random vandalism. Someone had been looking for something specific. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from the unknown number. Unknown. They didn't find what they were looking for, but they'll be back. Check the loose floorboard under his desk chair. I stared at the message, hairs rising on my arms. Whoever this was, they were watching me, or knew things about my house that even I didn't. Dropping to my knees, I pushed Jack's leather chair aside and ran my fingers over the hardwood. Near the wall, one board shifted slightly under pressure. I dug my fingernails into the edge and pulled upward. The board lifted, revealing a hollow space. Inside lay a thin manila envelope. With shaking hands, I retrieved it and opened the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a bank statement from an institution I'd never heard of, located in the Cayman Islands. The account was in my name. The balance showed just over $7 million. My name, my signature on the account application paperwork. But I'd never signed this. I'd never even seen it before. Yet it was unmistakably my signature, or a perfect forgery. The implications crashed over me in waves. Jack had established offshore accounts in my name, without my knowledge, with millions of dollars from where? His investment firm hadn't been that profitable. We'd lived well, but not $7 million well. The front door opened and closed quietly. I froze, clutching the document, suddenly aware of my vulnerability. Alone in a house where someone had already conducted one search, now holding possibly the very thing they sought. Footsteps moved through the foyer, familiar footsteps. "Mom?" David's voice called out. "Your flight wasn't supposed to land until tomorrow. Why didn't you call me?" Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by suspicion. David and Lisa had been in Jack's office, discussing how my husband had set me up. Now someone had ransacked the place. The timing couldn't be coincidental. I slipped the document into my pocket and took a deep breath. "In here," I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. David appeared in the doorway, stopping abruptly at the sight of the destruction. His face cycled through surprise, alarm, and, most tellingly, fear. "Jesus," he breathed. "When did this happen?" "I was hoping you might tell me," I replied carefully. "Since you and Lisa were just here, looking for something in this very room." His eyes widened, then narrowed as understanding dawned. "The security camera. You saw us. I heard you too. Something about accounts in my name that could send me to prison? Something Jack did?" I took a step toward my son, studying his face. "Tell me what's going on, David. Now." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture he'd had since childhood, one so like his father's it made my chest ache. "Mom, it's complicated and dangerous. You need to pack a bag and come stay with us until we figure this out. I'm not going anywhere until you explain what I saw, what you and Lisa were doing in your father's office, what these mysterious accounts are, and why someone ransacked my house looking for something." David's gaze darted to the open safe, then back to me. Did they find what they were looking for? How would I know? Until 10 minutes ago, I didn't even know that safe existed. I crossed my arms. 39 years of marriage, and it seems I didn't know a lot of things. My son's expression crumpled. In that moment, he looked young and vulnerable, more like the little boy who'd come to me with scraped knees than the successful architect he'd become. "Mom, Dad wasn't who you thought he was, who any of us thought he was." He glanced nervously at the windows. "But we can't talk here. It's not safe." "Not safe?" I repeated, incredulity rising. "This is my house, David. Your father's been dead for 8 months. What could possibly—" "Dad's not dead, Mom," David interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper. "And that's just the beginning of what he lied about." The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I reached for the edge of Jack's desk to steady myself. "That's impossible," I said. I identified his body. I watched them lower his casket into the ground. David shook his head, his eyes haunted. "You identified a body, but it wasn't Dad." Before I could process this bombshell, headlights swept across the office window as a car pulled into my driveway. David tensed, moving to the window to peer through the blinds. "We have to go," he said urgently. "Now, out the back door. I'm not going anywhere until you explain—" "Mom," he cut me off, his voice deadly serious. "Those men aren't here to explain anything. They're here to find what Dad hid, and they don't care if you're alive when they leave." The porch floorboards creaked under heavy footsteps. The doorbell rang once, an oddly civilized sound given the context. "Please, Mom," David whispered. "Trust me. Just this once, we need to run." And so I did something I'd never done in 62 years of life. I ran from my own home into the darkness with nothing but my phone, my purse, and a document bearing my forged signature on a criminal enterprise I knew nothing about. As David led me through the back garden toward the woods that bordered my property, one thought burned in my mind. If Jack wasn't dead, where had he been for 8 months? And what kind of man fakes his own death, frames his wife, and disappears, leaving her to face the consequences of his crimes? The kind of man I was going to find and make pay. David's car was parked 2 streets over, a precaution that suddenly seemed less paranoid. We reached it unseen, slipping through neighbors' backyards like common criminals. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Buckle up," he said, starting the engine but keeping the headlights off until we were well away from my street. I complied mechanically, still processing the impossible claim that Jack wasn't dead. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe. Lisa's waiting." "David," I said quietly, "if you don't start explaining, I'm going to open this door and roll out of this moving vehicle." He glanced at me, perhaps gauging whether his mild-mannered librarian mother might actually hurl herself from a car in motion. Whatever he saw in my expression convinced him. "Okay," he sighed. "The shortened version is this. About 3 months ago, Lisa and I received an anonymous package. Inside was a flash drive containing financial records from Dad's firm, showing he'd been running an elaborate money laundering operation for years. The records indicated multiple shell companies, offshore accounts, all with your signature on the founding documents." "I never signed any such things," I insisted. "I know that, Mom. The signatures were forged, expertly, but they were forgeries." He made a sharp turn onto the highway. "I hired a private investigator, ex-FBI guy named Grayson, to look into it quietly. He discovered Dad had been siphoning money from his investment clients for over a decade, routing it through these shell companies. That's impossible. Jack was the most ethical. Dad was a con man," David cut me harshly. "A very good one, good enough to fool his own family." The brutal assessment hung between us. I wanted to defend Jack, to insist there must be some mistake, but the evidence of the ransacked office and the bank statement in my pocket suggested otherwise. 2 weeks ago," David continued, "Grayson told me he'd found something big, something that suggested Dad might still be alive." My breath caught. "What did he find?" "Security footage from a hotel in Chicago showing a man matching Dad's description, using the name Thomas Ellison. The footage was from 3 months after his death." My mind reeled. Chicago. Jack had traveled there regularly for business conferences, often extended trips. "There's more," David said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "According to Grayson, Dad has another family in Chicago. A wife, 2 grown children." The world tilted again. I pressed my hands against the dashboard, suddenly nauseated. "That's not possible," I whispered. "We've been married since I was 23. There's no way he maintained a second family without me knowing. He traveled constantly, Mom. Week-long conferences, monthly client meetings. You never questioned it because that was just Dad's job." David's voice softened. "I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out like this." We drove in silence for several minutes, my mind struggling to reconcile the Jack I thought I knew with this monster David described. A bigamist, a thief, a man who would frame his own wife for his crimes. "Why would he fake his death?" I finally asked. "Grayson thinks the scheme was collapsing. Several large clients were asking questions, demanding audits. Dad must have realized it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled." He sighed heavily. "So he created the perfect escape plan. Stage a heart attack, disappear to his other life, and leave all the evidence pointing to you as the mastermind. But who was buried in his place? A John Doe from the morgue. The funeral director was paid off. Closed casket ceremony due to damage from resuscitation attempts. Very neat." We exited the highway onto increasingly rural roads, finally turning onto a gravel driveway leading to a small cabin nestled among towering pines. Lisa's car was parked outside. "Welcome to Grayson's safe house," David said, killing the engine. "We've been using it as our base of operations." Lisa met us at the door, her expression shifting from relief to concern when she saw my face. "You told her," she said to David. Not a question. "She saw us on the security camera, and someone ransacked the house looking for whatever it is they think Jack left behind." Lisa pulled me into a hug. "I'm so sorry, Susan. We wanted to find proof of your innocence before burdening you with any of this." Inside, the cabin was sparse but comfortable. Living area with a wood stove, small kitchen, 2 bedrooms. What caught my attention, however, was the wall covered in photos, documents, and index cards connected by red string, like something from a detective movie. I approached it slowly. At the center was Jack's photograph, linked to driver's licenses with different names. Branching out were financial documents, property records, and photos of people I'd never seen before, including a woman about my age, elegant, dark-haired, standing beside Jack at what appeared to be a graduation ceremony. "Catherine Ellison," Lisa said quietly, coming to stand beside me. "Jack's other wife. They've been married 35 years as far as we can tell. They have 2 children, Thomas Jr. and Rebecca." I stared at the woman who had unknowingly shared my husband for decades. Had she known about me? Was she complicit or another victim? "These men who came to the house tonight," I said, still staring at Catherine's face. "Who are they?" "We think they're working for whoever Jack was laundering money for," David replied. "Dangerous people who are now exposed because Jack disappeared with their millions." I pulled the Cayman Islands statement from my pocket. "Is this what they're looking for?" David took it, eyes widening. "Where did you get this?" "Someone texted me, told me to check under the floorboard in Jack's office." Lisa and David exchanged alarmed glances. "Someone else knows about all this," Lisa said. "Someone who has been watching the house. The question is whether they're trying to help or manipulate you," David added, examining the statement. "This account number could be valuable, but it's not enough to access the funds." I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. "So what happens now? I can't go home. My husband isn't dead but is apparently a criminal with another family. And dangerous people think I know where millions of their dollars are hidden." "Now," said a new voice from the doorway, "we find Jack before his friends find you." I turned to see a tall, weathered man in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, watchful eyes, the confident stance of someone familiar with danger. "Mom, this is Malcolm Grayson," David said. "The investigator I told you about." Grayson nodded in acknowledgement. "Mrs. Williams, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Apparently my circumstances have been built on lies for 40 years, I replied. "So these circumstances seem appropriate." He almost smiled. "Your son said you were tough. Good. You're going to need to be." "Why is that?" "Because," he said, approaching the evidence wall, "I've located Jack, and tomorrow we're going to pay him a visit." "Chicago?" I repeated. struggling to process Grayson's plan as dawn broke over the pine trees surrounding the cabin. "We're driving to Chicago today? Flight's faster," he replied, packing surveillance equipment into a nondescript duffel bag. "We leave in 2 hours." I hadn't slept. After Grayson's bombshell announcement, we'd spent half the night reviewing everything he'd uncovered about Jack's double life. My husband, the man who'd held my hand through childbirth, who'd nursed me through pneumonia, who'd forgotten our anniversary 3 years running, but always made up for it with thoughtful gifts, had been living a complete second existence in Illinois. Thomas Ellison, respected financial advisor, family man, husband to Catherine for 35 years, father to their children, Thomas Jr. and Rebecca, grandfather to Rebecca's twin boys, homeowner in Lake Forest, member of an exclusive golf club, donor to Northwestern University, where both his children had attended, all while being Jack Williams, my husband of 39 years in Connecticut. "I don't understand how this is physically possible," I said, staring at the driver's license photo of Thomas Ellison, undeniably Jack, though with different glasses and slightly grayer hair than in his most recent photos as Jack. The sheer logistics of maintaining 2 completely separate lives. "It's not unheard of," Grayson replied, checking the magazine in a handgun before securing it in a shoulder holster. The casual way he handled the weapon made me wonder about his background before becoming a private investigator. Men with jobs requiring regular travel are best positioned to pull it off. Your husband had the perfect cover with his investment business. 2 weeks with you, 2 weeks with her, David added quietly. Remember how he always said client trips couldn't be rescheduled? How inflexible his travel dates always were? I did remember. For decades, Jack's business trips had been sacrosanct, immovable features of our calendar around which everything else had to be arranged. I'd missed family weddings, canceled vacations, and rearranged countless plans to accommodate his rigid schedule. "All those Christmas business trips," I murmured, a particularly painful memory surfacing. 3 years in a row, he missed half of December, claimed he had year-end client meetings that couldn't be postponed. "He was with his other family," Lisa said gently. Of course he was. The pieces were aligning with nauseating clarity. The separate bank accounts he'd insisted on maintaining, for tax purposes, the strict boundaries around his office, the mysterious calls he'd take outside, claiming poor reception, his adamant refusal to retire despite having more than enough saved. "Did she know about me?" I asked, staring at Catherine Ellison's photograph. Grayson shook his head. "My surveillance suggests she's as much a victim as you are. She believes Thomas was in Boston on business when he supposedly died. As far as she knows, he's been working remotely for the past 8 months, traveling to meet clients but based primarily at home. So he faked his death as Jack, but continued living as Thomas," I summarized. "And now he's laundered money is missing, and dangerous people think I have it." "Exactly," Grayson confirmed, "which is why confronting him is our best option. He knows where the money is, and right now, that information is the only bargaining chip we have to keep you safe." I looked at David and Lisa, who'd been whispering together near the kitchen. "You're both coming to Chicago too?" They exchanged glances. "I'm coming," David said. "Lisa's staying behind to coordinate with a forensic accountant friend who's reviewing the financial records. We need to understand exactly what Dad was involved in." 2 hours later, I found myself passing through airport security with a borrowed suitcase containing hastily purchased clothes. The normality of the airport, families heading on vacations, business travelers tapping on laptops, felt surreal against the backdrop of my imploding life. "Once we land," Grayson explained quietly as we waited at our gate, "we'll establish surveillance on the Ellison house. According to my sources, Catherine has a standing lunch with friends on Thursdays, which means Jack or Thomas will likely be alone at home for at least 2 hours." "And then what?" I asked. "We just knock on the door?" "Then," he said, his eyes serious, "you confront the man who tried to frame you for his crimes, and I make sure he doesn't disappear again." The flight passed in a blur of anxiety and rehearsed confrontations that died on my lips. What do you say to a husband of nearly 4 decades who's revealed himself to be an absolute stranger? How do you address betrayal so profound it borders on mythological? In Chicago, we rented a nondescript sedan and drove to Lake Forest, an affluent suburb north of the city. The contrast between the modest colonial I'd shared with Jack and the sprawling Tudor mansion where he lived as Thomas was yet another betrayal. While I'd clipped coupons and maintained a careful household budget, he'd been living in luxury with his other family. We parked down the street, and Grayson used a telephoto lens to confirm the house was occupied. A silver Mercedes, Jack's car, sat in the circular driveway. "That's Catherine leaving now," Grayson said, focusing on a well-dressed woman emerging from the front door. She climbed into a white Lexus SUV and drove away, completely unaware that her husband's other wife was watching from less than 100 yards away. "Ready?" Grayson asked, starting the car. "No," I admitted, "but let's do it anyway." We pulled into the driveway, and I experienced a surreal moment of disassociation as I prepared to knock on the door of my husband's other home. Before I could second-guess myself, I pressed the doorbell. Footsteps approached. The door opened, and there he was, Jack, alive, standing before me in casual slacks and a blue button-down shirt I'd never seen before, a tumbler of scotch in his hand despite the early hour. His expression cycled from annoyed expectation to shock to something like terror as he registered my presence. "Susan," he breathed, the color draining from his face. "Hello, Jack," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Or do you prefer Thomas here?" He glanced past me, noticing David and Grayson, calculation replacing shock in his eyes. Always thinking, always planning. That was Jack. Even now, caught in the ultimate lie, his mind was working angles, seeking escape routes. "You'd better come in," he said finally, stepping back from the door, "before the neighbors see you." Heaven forbid the neighbors witness this particular domestic drama, I thought bitterly, as I stepped across the threshold into my husband's other life. "We have a lot to discuss," I said, taking in the tasteful decor, the family photos on the walls, Jack's smiling face alongside people I'd never met, celebrations I'd never attended, a lifetime that had existed parallel to mine. Starting with why you're not dead, and ending with why you set me up to take the fall for your crimes. Jack closed the door, his expression unreadable. "It's complicated, Susan." "I've got time," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "After all, according to my calendar, you've been dead for 8 months. This conversation is already overdue." Jack's other living room was a study in contrasts to our Connecticut home. Where I had favored comfortable, slightly worn furniture arranged for conversation, this space was a designer's showcase, leather sofas positioned to highlight a stone fireplace, abstract art on the walls that must have cost thousands, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking professionally landscaped grounds. "Quite the upgrade from our humble colonial," I observed, taking a seat without waiting for an invitation. Jack remained standing, his eyes darting between me, David, and Grayson, who positioned himself near the door, blocking the most obvious escape route. "This isn't what it looks like," Jack began, falling back on the classic defense of men caught in indefensible acts. "Really?" I tilted my head. "Because it looks like you've been living a double life for decades, stealing money from your clients and then faked your death, framing me for your crimes. Please, explain how my interpretation is incorrect." David stepped forward, his face tight with anger. "You set Mom up to take the fall. Your own wife. That wasn't—" "Don't," David interrupted. "We've seen the paperwork, her forged signatures, the accounts in her name, the shell companies. You built a perfect paper trail leading directly to her." Jack's shoulders sagged slightly. He moved to the bar cart in the corner and added more scotch to his glass. "You want a drink?" he asked, not meeting my eyes. "This conversation requires one." "I'm not here for a social call," I said coldly. "I'm here because dangerous men ransacked our house last night looking for money you stole. Money these men apparently think I have." That got his attention. His head snapped up, alarm evident in his expression. "They came to the house? Did they threaten you? Would you care if they had?" I asked. "You left me exposed, Jack, vulnerable. Evidently, my safety wasn't a priority when you were staging your convenient heart attack." He had the decency to flinch. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." "Enlighten us," Grayson spoke for the first time since entering the house. "What was the plan exactly?" Jack studied Grayson, clearly trying to place him. "You're not law enforcement." "No," Grayson agreed. "Consider me the family's insurance policy." Something in his tone must have convinced Jack of the seriousness of the situation because he sank into a chair opposite me. "The money laundering wasn't my idea," he began, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I was approached about 15 years ago by a client. Martin Keller. Wealthy industrialist, political connections. He needed a mechanism to clean money from certain international investments that operated in legal gray areas. And you just agreed? David asked incredulously. Jack shrugged. The commission was substantial, and once you start, it's nearly impossible to stop. These people don't accept resignations. So you were cleaning dirty money, I said. For whom exactly? Initially just Keller. Then he introduced me to others. A real estate developer, a technology entrepreneur, a state senator. All needing certain financial transactions kept off the record. He took a long swallow of his drink. Last year, Keller brought in someone new, Anton Resnick, Russian oligarch with ties to some very unpleasant people. The operation expanded significantly. And that's when things started falling apart, Grayson surmised. Jack nodded. Resnick wanted faster turnaround, larger volumes. The system I'd built couldn't handle it without raising red flags. I tried to scale back, but Resnick wasn't interested in my concerns. He made it clear failure wasn't an option. So you decided to disappear, I said, the pieces aligning. But why frame me? Something ugly flickered across Jack's face. Not guilt, but annoyance, as if I'd identified a flaw in his otherwise perfect plan. It wasn't personal, Susan. I needed someone to take the fall, and a spouse is the logical suspect. The plan was to vanish, let the heat fall on you initially, then have you cleared once I was safely away. You'd play the victimized wife, maybe face some minor charges, but ultimately be exonerated. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. You were willing to let me be arrested? Possibly imprisoned? How is that not personal? It was pragmatic, he replied. You're 62, no criminal record, respected in the community. You'd have gotten a sympathetic judge, minimal sentencing if any. I calculated the risks. You calculated the risks, I repeated numbly. For me, without my knowledge or consent. I protected you for years by keeping you ignorant, he countered, a flash of anger breaking through his composed facade. Do you think Catherine knows anything about my business dealings? Either of you? I maintained that separation deliberately. How noble, I said, acid dripping from each syllable. And how convenient that your protection absolved you from honesty, fidelity, or basic human decency. David stepped closer, his disgust evident. Where's the money, Dad? The funds you laundered for Resnick and the others? Jack's expression closed. That's not your concern. It became her concern, David nodded toward me, when men with guns started looking for it at her house. The same men who likely answer to this Resnick character. A flicker of genuine fear crossed Jack's face. They won't find anything in Connecticut. Then where will they find it? Grayson asked, his voice dangerously soft. Jack remained silent, calculation visible in his eyes. Let me be clear, Grayson continued. Mrs. Williams is now my client, and her safety is my priority. The only commodity you possess that might secure that safety is the location of Resnick's money, so I suggest you start talking. Or what? Jack challenged, bravado attempting to mask his unease. Or I leave, I said simply, rising from my seat. I walk out that door, call a taxi to the airport, and go home. Then I contact the FBI, tell them everything, and take my chances with witness protection. I leaned forward, dropping my voice, and then I call Catherine Ellison and introduce myself. Because if I'm going down, I'm certainly not going alone. The threat of involving his other wife hit home. Jack blanched, then drained his glass in one swallow. The money's in Switzerland, he said finally. 30 million in bearer bonds, secured in a private vault at Crédit National in Geneva. Untraceable, accessible only with the physical key and a 12-digit access code. Where's the key? Grayson pressed. Jack's eyes darted to the staircase. In my office safe. Get it, Grayson ordered. Now. And if I refuse? I pulled out my phone, holding it up. I have Catherine's number right here, courtesy of your son's investigation. Shall I call her? I'm sure she'd be fascinated to learn about your Connecticut family. For a moment, I thought he might refuse anyway. Then, with visible reluctance, he rose and headed for the stairs. Grayson followed, keeping a cautious distance. David, stay with your mother. As their footsteps receded upstairs, David turned to me, his expression pained. I'm sorry, Mom. I never imagined he was capable of this level of deception. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Neither did I, and I was married to him for 39 years. A crash from upstairs shattered the moment. Grayson's voice bellowed, "Stop!" David sprinted for the stairs, and I followed close behind, my heart hammering against my ribs. We reached the second-floor landing in time to see Jack, a small metal box in his hands, crash through a set of French doors onto a balcony. "He's running!" Grayson shouted, giving chase. From the balcony, Jack leaped to a nearby tree branch, moving with an agility that belied his 65 years. He scrambled down the tree trunk and sprinted across the manicured lawn toward the detached garage. We raced back downstairs and out the front door, but we were too late. The roar of an engine preceded Jack's silver Mercedes bursting from the garage, tires squealing as it accelerated down the driveway. Grayson swore viciously, already running toward our rental car. "Get in! He has the key to the vault!" As we piled into the sedan, I caught a glimpse of the Tudor mansion receding behind us, Jack's other life, built on lies and stolen money, now abandoned in his flight, just like he'd abandoned me. "He's heading south toward the city," Grayson said grimly, accelerating through an amber light as Jack's Mercedes remained 2 cars ahead of us. The suburban streets of Lake Forest gave way to busier thoroughfares, Jack weaving through traffic with reckless determination. I clutched the door handle, my body tense as Grayson matched his aggressive driving. "Why run?" David asked from the back seat. "He knows we'll just come back. Talk to Catherine." "Because he's not running from us," Grayson replied, eyes fixed on the Mercedes. "He's running toward something. The vault key is only half of what he needs to access that money." "The access code," I realized. "He said it was a 12-digit sequence, which he's either going to retrieve or already has a way to access," Grayson confirmed. "Either way, he's making his move now that we've forced his hand." The implications sank in. Jack wasn't just fleeing a confrontation. He was executing the next phase of a plan, one that likely included disappearing permanently with 30 million in untraceable funds. The Jack I thought I knew would never have been capable of such calculated abandonment. But then, that Jack had never really existed. We followed the Mercedes onto the highway, joining the flow of midday traffic heading into Chicago. Despite Grayson's skill, we lost ground as Jack executed a dangerous maneuver across 3 lanes to exit downtown. "Damn it," Grayson muttered, forced to continue past the exit. "We'll have to loop back around." "Wait," I said suddenly, a memory clicking into place. "I think I know where he's going. When Jack Thomas had business in Chicago, he always stayed at the same hotel, the Grayson." "You're sure?" Grayson asked, already navigating toward the next exit. "Positive. He claimed they had the best business center and fastest Wi-Fi." Another lie, undoubtedly. The hotel had simply been convenient to his other home. Grayson pulled a sharp U-turn as soon as we exited, heading back toward the city center. "If you're right, he'll have a room there under the Ellison name. Probably keeps clothes, documents, maybe the access code for that Swiss account." 10 minutes later, we pulled up to the gleaming facade of the Grayson, a luxury hotel catering to business travelers. Jack's Mercedes was nowhere in sight, but that didn't mean he wasn't here. The hotel offered underground parking for guests. "How do we play this?" David asked as we entered the opulent lobby, marble floors gleaming beneath crystal chandeliers. "Direct approach," Grayson decided, heading straight for the reception desk where a polished young woman greeted us with a professional smile. "Welcome to the Grayson. How may I assist you today?" Grayson produced a leather credential wallet that he flipped open briefly. Too briefly for me to see what it contained, but long enough to impress the receptionist. "We need information on a guest, Thomas Ellison. It's a security matter." Her smile faltered. "I'm not authorized to—" "Ma'am," Grayson cut in, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "Mr. Ellison is involved in a federal investigation. Cooperating now will save everyone considerable inconvenience." She hesitated, then tapped quickly on her keyboard. "Mr. Ellison is a regular guest, but he doesn't have a current reservation." "When was he last here?" I asked. 3 days ago. He checked out Tuesday morning." Grayson pressed further. "Does Mr. Ellison maintain a safe deposit box with the hotel?" The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. "A tell. I'm really not supposed to—" "Please," I interjected, improvising. "I'm his wife, Catherine." I removed my wedding ring, showing her. "Thomas called me in distress, saying he'd forgotten something critical in the hotel safe. He's waiting for us to retrieve it." The combination of Grayson's implied authority and my personal appeal worked. Her expression softened. "Mr. Ellison does maintain a secured box in our executive storage facility," she admitted. But I can't release it without his presence or written authorization. Grayson placed a business card on the counter. Call this number if Mr. Ellison returns today. It's extremely important. As we retreated to a seating area near the elevators, David looked confused. So he's not here? We lost him? No, Grayson said, surveying the lobby with practiced eyes. He's here. Or he will be. He needs whatever's in that safe deposit box. My eyes drifted to the polished elevator doors, then to the discreet sign indicating executive services on the mezzanine level. What if he doesn't come through the front? A hotel this size must have service entrances, staff elevators. Grayson nodded approvingly. Good thinking. David, stay here and watch the lobby. Mrs. Williams and I will cover the mezzanine level. The mezzanine housed the hotel's business center, a concierge desk for VIP guests, and a discreet door marked Executive Services that presumably led to the safe deposit facilities. We positioned ourselves in a small lounge area with a clear view of both the main and service elevators. How did you get the receptionist to talk to you? I asked Grayson quietly. What credentials did you show her? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Former Secret Service ID. I keep it as a souvenir. Most civilians don't look closely enough to see it's expired. That's technically impersonating a federal officer, I noted. Technically? He agreed without remorse. But sometimes, bending rules is necessary when pursuing someone like your husband. 40 minutes passed with no sign of Jack. I was beginning to think we'd misread his intentions when my phone buzzed with a text from David. David, he's here. Came through the garage elevator. Heading your way. Seconds later, the service elevator doors opened, and Jack stepped out, now wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, a feeble disguise. He moved purposefully toward the executive services door, seemingly unaware of our presence. Grayson moved to intercept him, and I followed. Jack spotted us just as he reached the door, his body tensing like a cornered animal. It's over, Jack, I said, keeping my voice low to avoid attracting attention. Whatever you're planning, it's done. You don't understand what you're interfering with, he hissed, glancing around for escape routes. These people will kill all of us if they don't get their money. Then let us help you, Grayson offered, positioning himself to block any retreat to the elevator. Turn over the key and the access code. Let the authorities handle Resnick and his associates. Jack barked a humorless laugh. The authorities? Resnick owns half the police department and has federal judges on his payroll. Why do you think I had to disappear? So your plan was to steal from him instead? I asked incredulously. How is that safer than going to the FBI? Something shifted in Jack's expression, calculation giving way to desperation. I didn't have a choice, Susan. Once you're in Resnick's organization, there's only one way out. And what about me? I demanded, anger flaring. Was I supposed to be collateral damage in your escape plan? I was going to send for you, he insisted, though the lie was transparent even to him. Once I was established somewhere safe. Established with Catherine, you mean? I countered. Or were you planning to abandon her too? The executive services door opened before he could respond, a uniformed attendant emerging. Mr. Ellison, your box is ready for you, sir. In that moment of distraction, Jack made his move, shoving me hard into Grayson and bolting for the main elevators. Grayson recovered quickly, giving chase, but the elevator doors were already closing with Jack inside. Stairs! Grayson commanded, spotting the emergency exit. We burst into the stairwell, racing down toward the lobby. I followed as quickly as I could, my sensible travel shoes slapping against the concrete steps. When we reached the lobby level, David was waiting, his expression grim. He went out the front, got into a taxi. Grayson swore under his breath. Did you see which direction? South on Michigan Avenue, David replied. I tried to follow, but he was already gone. He's heading for the airport, Grayson said with certainty. With the vault key, but without whatever was in that safe deposit box. We need to move. As we hurried back to our car, a terrible realization dawned. Jack was escaping again, this time for good. And despite everything he'd done, despite the betrayal and lies and criminal exposure, some irrational part of me still couldn't fully accept that my husband of 39 years was capable of such calculated cruelty. That part of me died as Grayson's phone rang, and he put it on speaker. Hello? He answered. Jack's voice filled the car. Tell Susan I'm sorry it came to this, but she needs to stop pursuing me, for her own safety. Jack, don't, I began. It's too late, he cut me off. Resnick's people know you're looking for me. They'll assume you know where the money is. Get somewhere safe and stay there." The call disconnected. "Can you trace that?" David asked Grayson. "Burner phone," Grayson replied, his expression grim. "But it confirms our problem just got bigger. If Resnick's people are watching, they now know Jack doesn't have their money, and they'll assume you do. So I'm still the target," I said quietly, the full weight of Jack's betrayal settling around me like a shroud. Even from 1,000 miles away, he's still throwing me to the wolves. The drive to O'Hare International Airport felt like a race against collapsing dominoes. My husband, or the stranger wearing his face, was attempting to flee the country with the key to millions in stolen money, while the people he'd stolen from were undoubtedly closing in on all of us. "There are 17 international departures in the next 3 hours," David reported from the back seat, scanning flight information on his phone. "Assuming he's heading to Switzerland to access that vault, he won't fly direct," Grayson countered, weaving through traffic with focused intensity. "Too obvious. He'll take a connecting route, probably through a country with minimal extradition agreements." I stared out the window, watching Chicago's skyline recede in the distance. For decades, this city had been nothing more than an occasional mention in Jack's business itinerary. Now I understood why he'd always discouraged me from accompanying him on these trips. Catherine might have spotted me, or I might have glimpsed their shared life, the carefully constructed house of cards collapsing with a single chance encounter. "I should call Catherine," I said suddenly. "Warn her." David looked up sharply. "Mom? Is that really?" "She deserves to know, David. Whatever Jack's done, she's as much a victim as I am. She's also our best leverage," Grayson noted, checking his mirrors with increasing frequency. "If Jack's running, knowing his other wife is about to learn everything might be the only thing that could make him reconsider." I shook my head firmly. "I won't use another woman's pain as leverage, not even against Jack." The parking structure at O'Hare loomed ahead, a concrete labyrinth that could easily conceal one man intent on disappearing. Grayson circled several levels before spotting the silver Mercedes parked haphazardly in a corner space. "He's definitely here," Grayson confirmed, pulling into a spot with a clear view of Jack's abandoned vehicle. "Now we need to figure out which flight." "I'll check with the airlines," David volunteered, already dialing a number on his phone. As an architect with several international projects, he had status with multiple carriers that might yield information. While he worked that angle, Grayson and I approached Jack's Mercedes. The driver's door was unlocked, unusual for my habitually cautious husband. "Something's wrong," I murmured, as Grayson carefully opened the door. Jack would never leave his car unsecured like this. The interior appeared normal at first glance. No signs of struggle, no blood or evidence of violence. But when Grayson popped the trunk release, we discovered the first genuine clue that things had gone sideways. A small carry-on suitcase, partially opened, clothes spilling out as if someone had searched through it hastily. "He packed for a one-way trip," Grayson observed, carefully examining the contents without disturbing potential evidence. "Passport, foreign currency, burner phones. Your husband was planning to vanish permanently. Then why leave it in the car?" I wondered aloud, a cold dread spreading through me. Unless someone intercepted him," Grayson finished grimly. David jogged up to us, his expression confirming our growing fears. No Thomas Ellison or Jack Williams on any manifest, but the Swiss air desk reported a disturbance about 40 minutes ago. A man matching Dad's description was approached by 2 men in suits. They appeared to be escorting him out a service entrance. "Resnick's people found him first," Grayson concluded, already scanning the parking structure's exits and security cameras. "We need to move, now." "Move where?" I demanded. "If these people have Jack, what's our next step?" Grayson's face hardened. "We follow. These men will take your husband to Resnick, who wants one thing, his money. Jack has the physical key, but apparently not the access code, which means he's only valuable until he produces both or reveals where to find them." "You think they'll torture him for information?" David said, his voice tight. "I think they'll do whatever is necessary to recover $30 million, Grayson replied evenly. "And if Jack convinces them that you have what they need..." He didn't finish the sentence. An icy clarity settled over me. Jack had created this nightmare, entangled all of us in his web of lies and theft. Now it was up to me to find a way out, not just for myself, but for David and Lisa too. "The access code has to be somewhere," I reasoned. my librarian's mind automatically organizing the scattered puzzle pieces. Jack wouldn't risk forgetting it, but he also wouldn't keep it anywhere obvious. Could it be in the hotel's safe deposit box? David suggested. I shook my head. Too risky. If someone else gained access, they'd have half of what they needed to steal the money. Somewhere personal then, Grayson mused. Something only he would recognize as significant. A memory surfaced suddenly. Jack at his desk in Connecticut, meticulously updating a leather-bound journal each month. His legacy book, he'd called it, where he recorded important family dates, achievements, financial milestones. His journal, I said, certainty blooming. Jack kept a record of everything important. Dates, accounts, passwords, all encoded in a system only he understood. The journal must contain the access code, disguised as something else. Where is this journal? Grayson asked intently. In his office at home. It's a red leather book with no title on the spine, kept in the right-hand drawer of his desk. Grayson was already dialing a number on his phone. Lisa, we need you to check Jack's office for a red leather journal in his desk drawer. Yes, immediately. He listened for a moment. Stay on the line while you look. The seconds stretched into minutes as we waited, the parking garage suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable. I found myself scanning for suspicious vehicles, unfamiliar faces, a new hypervigilance born from the knowledge that dangerous men were now interested in finding me. She found it, Grayson finally reported, his voice tight with controlled urgency. Lisa's sending photographs of every page now. My phone buzzed as the images arrived. Pages of Jack's meticulous handwriting, recording everything from David's college graduation to the date we'd replaced the roof on our Connecticut home. To anyone else, it would appear to be an ordinary family record, sentimental but unremarkable. I scrolled through the images, searching for patterns, anomalies, anything that might conceal a 12-digit code. One entry caught my attention. A page titled Legacy Investments, with a list of seemingly random dates and numbers. This, I said, showing Grayson and David. Legacy was Jack's code word for his most private financial matters, and look at the formatting of these account numbers. The sequence was disguised as portfolio values, but the pattern was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. 12 digits, grouped in threes, matching the format of the Swiss Vault access code Jack had mentioned. That has to be it, David agreed. But how does this help us find Dad? Grayson was already moving back toward our rental car. It gives us something to trade. Resnick wants his money. We now have the complete key to accessing it. You want to negotiate with these people? I asked, hurrying to keep pace. The same people who've committed who knows how many crimes, who tried to break into my house? I want to get ahead of them, Grayson corrected, his expression grim. Before they decide Jack isn't worth keeping alive, and before they come looking for you next. As we pulled out of the parking structure, David's phone rang, Lisa's number flashing on the screen. Lisa, what's wrong? His face paled as he listened. When? Are you sure? After a moment, he disconnected, his hands visibly shaking. What is it? I demanded. Someone broke into the cabin while Lisa was out getting supplies, he reported tightly. They ransacked the place, took all our research. The evidence wall is destroyed. Is Lisa all right? I asked immediately. She's fine. She came back as they were leaving, stayed hidden until they were gone. He swallowed hard. But that's not all. She got a partial plate number on their car. She ran it through a friend at the DMV. And, Grayson prompted, the car is registered to a shell company owned by Senator Howard Keller's family trust. The name hit me like a physical blow. Howard Keller, Martin Keller's son. The state senator Jack had mentioned as one of his clients. They're all connected, I whispered. Jack's clients, the money laundering, the political power, it's a complete network. And they're closing in, Grayson confirmed grimly. From all directions. Night had fallen over Chicago, the city's glittering skyline a stark contrast to the industrial wasteland where we now found ourselves. Grayson had insisted on switching vehicles twice since leaving the airport, finally trading our rental car for a nondescript delivery van obtained through channels he declined to explain. You're sure this is the right place? I asked, peering through the windshield at the abandoned warehouse looming before us. The building's broken windows and graffiti-covered walls suggested years of neglect. This is the address Resnick's people provided, Grayson confirmed, checking his weapon one final time before tucking it into his shoulder holster. Remember the plan. I do the talking. You stay behind me. David remains in the van as our contingency. The plan had coalesced over the past 5 hours after Grayson made contact with Resnick's organization through connections I didn't want to know about. The terms were simple. Jack's life in exchange for the complete access information to the Swiss vault. No police, no FBI, just a clean exchange. I wasn't naive enough to believe it would be that straightforward. Neither was Grayson, which is why he'd insisted on precautions, multiple escape routes mapped, a second vehicle hidden nearby, and a dead man switch that would send all our evidence to the FBI if we didn't check in by morning. I still think I should come with you, David insisted from the driver's seat, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. We've been through this, I replied, summoning a calm I didn't feel. If something goes wrong, you're our insurance policy. Lisa needs you to come home. The reminder of his pregnant wife, waiting anxiously at a safe location, was enough to settle him, though his expression remained tortured. No child should have to watch their parent walk into danger. But then, no child should discover their father was a criminal who had abandoned and endangered their mother either. Ready? Grayson asked, his tone suggesting that my readiness was irrelevant. The timetable wasn't ours to control. I nodded, patting the inner pocket of my jacket where I'd secured a copy of the journal page with the access code. The original journal remained with Lisa, one more layer of protection against betrayal. The warehouse interior was cavernous, the darkness broken only by a few industrial lights illuminating the center of the space. 3 black SUVs were parked in a semicircle, their headlights creating harsh shadows. Men in suits stood at strategic points, their stances communicating professional menace. And there, in the center, seated on a metal chair with his hands bound before him, was Jack. Even from a distance, I could see he'd been roughly handled. Blood had dried at the corner of his mouth, and he held himself rigidly, suggesting additional injuries beneath his clothing. Our eyes met across the concrete expanse, and something unreadable flickered across his face. Shame, perhaps, or simply calculation of how my presence affected his chances of survival. A tall man with silver hair stepped forward from behind the SUVs. His bespoke suit and polished shoes looked incongruous in the decrepit setting. Mrs. Williams, he greeted me, his accent faintly Eastern European. And associate, I appreciate your punctuality. Mr. Resnick, Grayson acknowledged, we've brought what you asked for. Resnick's smile never reached his eyes. Excellent. Though I must admit, I'm curious how a simple librarian and her son managed to determine what my best people could not, the location of your husband's insurance policy. The casual reference to my profession confirmed my worst fears. They'd been investigating me, probably for months. While I'd been grieving Jack's death, these people had been compiling information on his family, preparing for the eventuality that he might betray them. Perhaps you should hire librarians instead of thugs, I replied, surprising myself with my steady voice. We're quite good at finding information. A genuine laugh escaped Resnick. I can see why Jack married you. Spirit is an undervalued quality these days. His expression hardened. But pleasantries aside, I believe you have something that belongs to me. First, I want confirmation that you'll leave my family alone after this exchange, I said. My son, his wife, myself, we disappear from your radar permanently. Of course, Resnick agreed smoothly. I have no interest in harming innocent parties. This unfortunate situation was entirely of Jack's making. Susan, don't, Jack began, only to receive a backhanded blow from one of the guards that snapped his head sideways. Your husband seems to think you shouldn't trust me, Resnick observed. Ironic, coming from a man who maintained 2 complete families for decades and tried to frame his wife for his crimes. The casual revelation that Resnick knew everything about Jack's double life sent a chill through me. These people had been watching us all like chess pieces on a board. The access information, Grayson redirected, stepping slightly forward, in exchange for Jack Williams, alive and unharmed. Unharmed is relative at this point, Resnick shrugged, glancing at Jack's battered face, but alive, certainly. I removed the paper from my jacket and handed it to Grayson, who approached Resnick with measured steps. One of the suited men intercepted him, taking the document and delivering it to his boss. Resnick studied the journal page, his expression revealing nothing. After a moment, he pulled out a phone and called someone, speaking rapidly in what sounded like Russian. The conversation was brief, ending with a satisfied nod. The code format matches our records, he confirmed. Now, The physical key? Release him first, Grayson countered. The key comes after. Resnick considered this for a moment, then signaled to the guards. One of them cut Jack's restraints and hauled him roughly to his feet. Jack stumbled forward, his movements stiff and pained. As he passed Resnick, the Russian caught his arm. "Remember our conversation, Jack," he said quietly, though the warehouse acoustics carried his words clearly. About consequences. Something dark passed between them before Jack was shoved forward, making his way unsteadily toward us. When he reached my side, I caught a whiff of dried blood and expensive cologne, the latter a final, absurd reminder of the facade he'd maintained for so long. "Susan," he began, his voice hoarse. "Not now," I cut him off, unable to process the complexity of facing him in this moment. Grayson produced a small metal object from his pocket, the vault key we'd found hidden in a compartment of Jack's Mercedes after more thorough searching. "Our side of the bargain," he said, holding it up for Resnick to see. "Excellent," Resnick replied. "Bring it to me, Mrs. Williams." Grayson tensed beside me. "That wasn't the arrangement." "The arrangement has evolved," Resnick stated calmly. "Mrs. Williams will bring me the key. A simple courtesy. It was a power play, designed to remind us who controlled the situation." I took the key from Grayson, our eyes meeting briefly. A silent communication of caution. "It's fine," I assured him, though we both knew it wasn't. I crossed the concrete expanse with measured steps, feeling Jack and Grayson's eyes on my back, aware of the armed men surrounding us. When I reached Resnick, he extended his hand, palm up. As I placed the key in his palm, his fingers closed around mine, holding me in place. "You should know," he said quietly, for my ears alone. "Your husband offered to trade your life for his freedom. Twice." His smile was cold. "Some men simply cannot be rehabilitated, Mrs. Williams." He released my hand and I stepped back, the final illusion about Jack Williams shattering into irretrievable fragments. I turned and walked back toward Grayson and Jack, my mind curiously calm despite the danger still surrounding us. "We're done here," Resnick announced. "My men will escort you to your vehicle. I suggest you leave Chicago tonight and forget this unfortunate chapter entirely." As we backed toward the warehouse entrance, flanked by Resnick's guards, Jack leaned close to me. "Susan, whatever he told you, save it," I whispered fiercely. "We're not out of this yet." The night air hit my face as we emerged from the warehouse, the van with David waiting exactly where we'd left it. The exchange was complete. We had Jack. Resnick had his key and code. But as Grayson had warned earlier, people like Resnick didn't leave loose ends, and we were the loosest ends of all. "Drive," Grayson ordered as we piled into the van, Jack wincing as he settled into the back seat. "Don't stop until we hit the expressway." David didn't need to be told twice. The van lurched forward, tires squealing as we accelerated away from the warehouse. In the side mirror, I watched Resnick's men return to their SUVs, their postures relaxed, unhurried. "That was too easy," I said, voicing what we all must have been thinking. "They're following us," Grayson confirmed, checking the mirrors. "At a distance, but they're there." "Of course they are," Jack spoke up, his voice ragged. "Resnick never leaves witnesses, and we know too much about his operation. The exchange was just to get the vault access." I turned to look at my husband, this man who was simultaneously intimately familiar and a complete stranger. In the harsh glow of passing streetlights, I catalogued his injuries: split lip, bruised cheek, the careful way he held his ribs, suggesting further damage beneath his shirt. I should have felt sympathy, concern, the instinctive care of a wife seeing her husband injured. Instead, I felt nothing. The emotional tether that had connected us for 39 years had been severed, not by his death, but by the calculated cruelty of his betrayal. "Why did you do it, Jack?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me since this nightmare began. Why the second family? Why the money laundering? Was our life together so unbearable? His eyes met mine, then slid away. "It wasn't about you, Susan." "Clearly," I replied, the words sharp with bitterness. "We need to focus," Grayson interrupted. "They're going to make their move soon, probably once we're somewhere isolated. David, take the next exit and head for the industrial district. We need to switch to the backup vehicle." "What about the evidence?" David asked, executing a sharp turn that sent us all grabbing for handholds. "Everything Lisa compiled about Resnick's operation, Dad's crimes, Senator Keller's involvement, already in motion," Grayson assured him. The FBI will receive everything by morning, regardless of what happens to us tonight. Jack straightened at this, alarm breaking through his pained expression. You've contacted the FBI? Are you insane? Resnick owns half the Chicago field office. Not the Chicago office, Grayson replied calmly. And not directly. I have protocols in place from my previous career. Secure channels that can't be intercepted or traced. A humorless laugh escaped Jack. You think that matters? Resnick's network extends to every major law enforcement agency in the country. Why do you think I had to run instead of turning state's evidence? Because you're a coward, I said quietly, the truth of it suddenly blindingly clear. It was never about protecting me. You ran because you wanted the money and the clean escape. Everything else was justification. Jack flinched as if I'd struck him. For the first time since finding him alive, I saw something genuine in his expression. Shame, perhaps, or simply the discomfort of being truly seen. The SUVs are gaining, David reported tensely, checking the mirrors as he navigated through increasingly deserted streets. 3 of them now. There, Grayson pointed to an abandoned loading dock beside what appeared to be a defunct meatpacking plant. Pull in there. The second vehicle is in the garage structure around back. David maneuvered the van into the shadowed area, cutting the lights and engine. In the sudden silence, I could hear Jack's labored breathing, the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. We go on foot from here, Grayson instructed, checking his weapon again. Through the building to the rear exit. The SUV is fueled and ready, keys under the floor mat. If we get separated, the rendezvous point is the motel we discussed. David nodded, his face tense but determined, as he helped Jack from the van. Despite everything, he was still acting as a dutiful son, still helping the father who had endangered us all. We moved swiftly through the darkened building, Grayson leading with his gun drawn, navigating by the beam of a small tactical flashlight. The interior was a maze of abandoned processing equipment, conveyor belts frozen in time, hooks hanging ominously from overhead tracks. How much further? Jack whispered, his breathing increasingly labored. Almost there, Grayson replied, his voice low. Loading dock is just beyond. The sound of breaking glass echoed from somewhere behind us, followed by the heavy tread of multiple sets of footsteps. They've found the van, Grayson hissed. Move! We broke into a run, Jack struggling to keep pace despite David's supporting arm. I stayed close behind them, acutely aware of how exposed we were, how the beam of Grayson's flashlight must look like a beacon to our pursuers. The rear exit appeared ahead, a loading dock door partially raised, revealing the night beyond. Grayson ducked under it first, then helped Jack and David through. I was halfway under when the first gunshot cracked through the cavernous space, the bullet striking metal somewhere to my left. Go! Grayson shouted, returning fire as I scrambled under the door. Outside was a small parking area, and there, as promised, waited an SUV, older model, nondescript, perfect for blending into traffic. David was already helping Jack into the back seat. Get in, he called to me, sliding into the driver's seat and retrieving the keys from beneath the mat. I turned back toward the loading dock door, where Grayson was still exchanging fire with our pursuers. Grayson! Come on! He backed toward us, still firing methodically into the darkness of the building. The engine roared to life as David started the SUV. That's when I saw Jack moving, not toward the vehicle, but away from it, using the distraction of the gunfire to slip into the shadows at the edge of the parking area. Jack! I shouted, disbelief momentarily overwhelming caution. What are you doing? He paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't decipher in the dim light. I'm sorry, Susan. I can't go with you. Dad, get in the car, David yelled from the driver's seat. We have to go now. Another burst of gunfire erupted from the loading dock as Resnick's men pushed through. Grayson fired twice more, then sprinted for the SUV. Where's Jack? He demanded as he reached us. I pointed wordlessly to the retreating figure of my husband, now barely visible at the edge of the lot. He's running again, Grayson spat in disgust. Of course he is. Get in the car, Mrs. Williams. Now! I hesitated, still watching Jack's diminishing silhouette. This was it, the final abandonment, the last betrayal. After everything, he was choosing himself again, leaving us to face the consequences of his actions. Mom! David's panicked voice cut through my thoughts. Please! I climbed into the SUV just as another spray of bullets peppered the side of the vehicle. Grayson dove into the passenger seat, and David floored the accelerator, tires screaming as we rocketed out of the parking area. "He's gone," I said numbly as we sped away, the reality of Jack's choice settling over me like a physical weight. "He just left us. He made his decision," Grayson replied grimly, checking the side mirror. "And it might actually work in our favor. They'll split their forces, some following us, others going after him." "But why?" David asked, his voice cracking with emotion as he navigated through the darkened streets. "Why run now? Where would he even go?" The answer came to me with sudden, perfect clarity. "Catherine," I said, "he's going back to his other life." The pieces aligned in my mind. Jack's injuries would explain an accident or mugging to his other wife. His Chicago identity wasn't directly connected to the money laundering. If Resnick's focus stayed on recovering his money rather than revenge, Jack might think he could simply slip back into his Thomas Ellison persona. "He's delusional if he thinks that will work," Grayson muttered, checking his weapons magazine. "Resnick knows about both his identities." A bitter laugh escaped me. Delusion has been Jack's specialty for decades. He's convinced himself he can talk his way out of anything. We drove in tense silence for several minutes, taking a circuitous route through industrial areas and side streets, trying to shake any pursuers. Eventually, Grayson directed David onto the expressway heading south, away from Chicago, away from Jack, away from the wreckage of my former life. "What happens now?" I asked, watching the city recede in the rear window. "Resnick still has men looking for us. The FBI might not move quickly enough to protect us. And Jack has made his choice," Grayson finished for me. "Our priority is getting you and David to safety until the evidence reaches the right people and arrests begin." "And then what?" I pressed. "Witness protection? New identities? Starting over at 62? David caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "We'll face it together, Mom. Whatever comes next." As we drove through the night, putting miles between ourselves and Chicago, I thought about the woman I had been just days ago. A widow mourning a faithful husband. A mother who trusted her son but didn't understand his concern. A retiree whose greatest worry had been whether to remodel the kitchen. That woman was gone, replaced by someone harder, more cautious, but also more clear-eyed. Someone who had looked betrayal in the face and survived it. Someone who had discovered she was stronger than she'd ever been allowed to believe. Jack had orchestrated my figurative death when he'd arranged his own fake demise and set me up as his fall person. But in doing so, he had inadvertently given me a rebirth. Whatever identity I carried forward from this night, it would be one I chose for myself, not a role assigned by a man who had never truly seen me. "Together," I agreed, reaching forward to squeeze my son's shoulder. "That's the only way forward." The highway stretched before us, dark but full of possibility, as we drove toward an uncertain dawn. 3 months later, I stood at the window of a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, watching rain trace patterns down the glass. The weather here was a stark contrast to Connecticut's crisp autumn, perpetually damp, the sky a watercolor of grays and silvers. I had begun to find beauty in it, in this city where no one knew me as Susan Williams, grieving widow and betrayed wife. Here, I was Ellen Foster, early retiree and recent transplant from the East Coast. A simple cover identity arranged by Grayson's contacts while the federal investigation proceeded. Not witness protection technically, that would come later if necessary, but a temporary shield while the dominoes of Jack's criminal enterprise fell one by one. My phone buzzed on the counter. David's daily check-in, right on schedule. Despite having his own protective relocation with Lisa, now 7 months pregnant, he maintained consistent contact. Sometimes these calls were our only tether to normality in lives that had become unrecognizable. "How are the childbirth classes going?" I asked after exchanging greetings. "Lisa's a natural," he replied, pride evident even through the phone. "The instructor says she has excellent breathing technique." We chatted about ordinary things, the nursery they were preparing, the rainy weather in both our new locations, a book I'd recently read. Only at the end did he broach the subject we both knew was coming. "Grayson called this morning," David said, his tone shifting. "The FBI made more arrests yesterday. 3 executives from Keller Industries, a federal judge in Illinois, and 2 high-ranking members of the Chicago Police Department. The corruption network is unraveling faster than they expected." "And Senator Keller?" I asked. "Resigned last week, ahead of indictment." They're saying he'll cooperate in exchange for leniency. I absorbed this silently, another piece of Jack's world collapsing. In the weeks following our escape from Chicago, Grayson's evidence package had triggered one of the largest public corruption investigations in recent history. What the press had dubbed the Resnick affair had already implicated dozens of officials, exposed millions in bribes, and revealed money laundering operations across 5 states. "Any word about Jack?" I finally asked, the question I both dreaded and needed answered. David hesitated. "Nothing confirmed. Catherine Ellison filed a missing persons report for Thomas 6 weeks ago. Authorities are treating the cases as connected, but there's been no trace of him since that night in Chicago. After Jack's final abandonment in the warehouse parking lot, he had vanished completely. No credit card transactions, no border crossings under known aliases, no contact with either of his families. It was as if he had evaporated into the ether, a disappearing act more thorough than his faked death. And Resnick? Still in FBI custody, still talking. His testimony is what's driving most of these new arrests. Anton Resnick, it turned out, had been even more pragmatic than Jack. When federal agents had arrived at his Lakeshore Drive penthouse the morning after our warehouse confrontation, he had immediately offered cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. The man who had terrified my husband enough to fake his own death had turned state's evidence without hesitation. We ended the call with promises to speak tomorrow, and I returned to the window, watching strangers navigate rain-slicked streets with umbrellas and raincoats. Anonymous lives, uncomplicated by international money laundering and bigamist husbands. The buzzer for my apartment startled me from my thoughts. "Package for Ellen Foster," came the building manager's voice through the intercom. Moments later, I signed for a small, padded envelope with no return address, the handwriting unfamiliar. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note on expensive stationery. "I thought you should have this. He didn't deserve either of us. KK Catherine Ellison." Jack's other wife had found me. Despite the careful precautions and false identity, my hands trembling slightly, I connected the thumb drive to my laptop. It contained a single video file, dated 3 weeks ago. I hesitated before clicking play, uncertain whether I wanted to see whatever Catherine had deemed important enough to breach our mutual anonymity. The video opened on what appeared to be security footage from a luxury hotel lobby. The quality was excellent, the timestamp visible in the corner. For several seconds, nothing of note happened. Guests checking in, staff moving efficiently behind the desk. Then Jack walked into frame. My breath caught. He looked thinner than when I'd last seen him, and he'd grown a beard, but it was unmistakably my husband. He approached the front desk with the confident stride I recognized from countless business functions and social events. Jack Williams in his element, charming and self-assured, despite being a fugitive from both the law and Resnick's remaining associates. A second figure entered the frame, approaching Jack from behind. Average height, unremarkable appearance. Nothing that would draw attention in a crowded hotel lobby. But something in his purposeful movement caught my attention. The man reached Jack just as he finished speaking to the receptionist. There was a brief exchange, Jack's expression shifting from annoyance to recognition to fear in the space of seconds. The man gestured toward the elevators, and Jack reluctantly complied. They disappeared from view, and the video jumped to a different camera angle, a hallway on an upper floor. Jack and his companion walked to a room, entered, and the door closed behind them. The video jumped once more. Same hallway, same door. But the timestamp showed nearly 2 hours had passed. The door opened, and the unremarkable man emerged alone, straightening his jacket before walking calmly toward the emergency stairs rather than the elevator. Jack never reappeared. The video ended, leaving me staring at a blank screen, a chill running through me despite the apartment's adequate heating. I understood immediately why Catherine had sent this. The message was clear. Jack Williams, or Thomas Ellison, had finally run out of lives. Whether the man was one of Resnick's associates tying up loose ends, or someone else from Jack's tangled web of deception, the outcome seemed clear. My husband was gone. Not missing this time, but truly gone. I should have felt something. Grief, closure, vindication, something appropriate to the apparent death of a man I'd spent most of my adult life with. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow calm. The man in that video wasn't my husband. Perhaps he never had been. My phone rang. Grayson this time, not David. "You've seen it?" he asked without preamble. "The hotel footage?" "Yes. Catherine sent it. We need to move you immediately. If she found you—" "She's not a threat," I interrupted with certainty. This was woman to woman, a final closure for both of us. Silence stretched between us as Grayson considered this. "Are you all right?" he finally asked, his professional detachment softening slightly. "I'm fine," I replied, surprised to find it was true. "Jack died for me 8 months ago. This is just confirmation." After ending the call, I removed the thumb drive and placed it in a small decorative box on my bookshelf. Not hidden, but not prominently displayed either. A relic of a life that no longer existed. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows with newfound purpose. I made tea and settled into the small reading nook I'd arranged by the window, my favorite spot in this temporary home. On the side table lay library books about Oregon history and local architecture, a newspaper opened to job listings I'd circled, part-time positions at bookstores and community centers, and a brochure for a painting class at the community college. Small steps toward whatever came next. The federal prosecutor handling the Resnick case had been clear. After the trials concluded, I would have options. I could enter witness protection permanently, with a new identity and location. Or, if the threat assessment allowed it, I might eventually reclaim some version of my former life. Perhaps not in Connecticut, but somewhere I could use my real name again, reconnect with old friends, live without looking over my shoulder. For now, though, I was Ellen Foster, learning to paint in the rain and reading books about my new city, building a life not defined by Jack Williams or his betrayals. My phone buzzed with a text from David, an ultrasound image of my future granddaughter, captured at this morning's appointment. Beneath it, he'd written, "She already has Mom's chin. We can't wait for you to meet her." I smiled, tracing the tiny profile with my fingertip. Jack had taken so much from us: security, trust, the past we thought we'd shared. But he hadn't taken everything. David and Lisa were creating a new family. I was discovering capacities I'd never been allowed to develop during my marriage. We were moving forward, one day at a time, into lives of our own choosing. Outside, the rain began to ease, patches of late afternoon sunlight breaking through the clouds. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to the community college, registering for the painting class and a workshop on local history. Ellen Foster had plans for the future, and for the first time in months, I found myself looking forward rather than back, not with certainty, but with something more valuable: possibility. The past was written, its final chapter now closed with Catherine's video, but the blank canvas of whatever came next belonged to me alone.